Single shot autofocus, single point, back button focusing, zoomed right in, F11, tripod lockdown, cable release, mirror lockup. I've discussed all these things in recent videos that I've been doing on how to get sharp images in the landscape. In this video we're going to be talking about the last component of the puzzle, where to focus. Where do I put that focus point? How do I know that I'm getting the correct depth of field and my subject is pin sharp? So I'll put that picture up on the screen for you in a minute. I've had to change my setup a little bit, to be honest, and you might notice I put my filters on the front because the lights come up quite a bit and it's got really bright. In fact, I'm probably going to have to use some exposure blending and bracketing just to get it right. But that's not going to change where we focus. And for this picture, I've used one of the oldest methods that's been around. It's been around for a long time. We used to use it with film cameras before we had digital viewfinders and could examine focus out in the field. And that is to judge about a third of the way in the picture, and that's where you set your focal point. The reason that I can do that in this image is because I'm shooting at about 35mm, and I know at 35mm that when I'm using an aperture of f11, which is really good for this lens, then I'm going to get decent focus from about just over 2 meters right through to infinity. So that's the furthest distance I can see. I know all that's going to be sharp. So when I look at my composition, provided I know that my nearest point of focus is about 2 meters or just over, then everything's going to be good to go. And I don't have to worry about picking anything else in the subject. So that's a real good method to use if you're shooting a general landscape. And of course, the wider angle that you're using, even better. You get a deeper depth of field and it's even easier to get it right under those situations. So let's come around the back of the camera and I'll show you how I've done that. So I just hope everything's not too bright for you in the background. You can actually see what I'm doing. So let's put this picture up on the viewfinder. So just down here, we can see where we've got the focus point. And I'm sort of looking through the frame and having a look where we are. So these rocks over here on the left-hand side of the frame, as it's going to be, I know that they're probably just over 2 meters. I judge 2 meters by thinking, could I drop a standard door in that space? And if I think, yeah, a door would fit in there easy, I know it's going to be a little bit over 2 meters. So that gives me a rough guide of what it is, because it's not easy to judge distance all the time. So I've basically come up the frame about a third, maybe a little bit under, and I've used the zoom in button just to zoom in to a magnification of about 10 times. And then using our back button focusing, I can focus out on that point. I know that's dead sharp in the frame. We can zoom back out again. We can use our cable release to make sure everything's good. I know this is going to be way overexposed. Well, actually, I'll turn it back like that, look. And then we can take our picture. And that's all there is to it. And like I said, for these images, I'm going to take some focus brackets and show you the finished result. Sometimes the landscape does all the work for you. Low golden sunlight after sunrise reflected in the river. It adds depth to the photograph. All you need to do is press the button. Been taking some test shots. I'll quite often do that. In fact, I normally always do that. So when I get to a location, before I use the cable release and set the camera up with filters if I need them or anything else, I'll just take a few pictures to see if it's going to work. This morning, chaps, the light has really been, well, it's been absolutely fantastic. I've been really chasing the light. And I came around this corner, and before me I was facing straight into the sun, but there were some beautiful trees down here backlit with the River Tavy running right through the middle of them and a hazy sort of hillside in the background. It was absolutely stunning and I just had to capture it. So I've stopped to do that. The light's changing all the time, so well, yeah, we'll have to see how it works out. The clouds are coming over a bit now, so I'm losing some of that light. But anyway, it was a good spot to actually stop and talk about one of the most obvious ways of getting sharp pictures is to remember what your subject is. Because it's very easy to get all embroiled in all the technical side of photography and trying to get everything spot on, whilst at the same time not actually thinking about what am I photographing and making sure that that's correct. And in this situation where I'm not too worried if the background goes a little bit soft, but what I do want is those beautiful backlit trees and that river running through and drawing me into the frame. That's what's important. So I need to focus in such a way that I'm going to get those trees in focus. So let's go back up and set the camera up, and we'll show you how I'm going to do that. Right, I really do hope that you can actually see me and see what I'm looking at. I've got set the camera up, the scene behind me. Now I haven't got my cable release on. I'm just using the self timer because, to be honest, because of the shutter speeds that I'm now working at shooting into the light, I really don't need to worry about any sort of vibration from that side of things. The subject I've got behind me is, I'm quite a distance from my subject, and to be honest, I don't really have to worry about not getting a sharp picture in this situation. I could use many different methods. I could focus a third into the frame and everything would be front to back sharp. I could use something called hyperfocal distancing, which we'll talk about in a minute. And I could also use the most obvious thing you can think of, is what is my subject. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to focus on those trees. So I've got a row of trees. There's three main ones that I'm looking at, but there's actually 2, 3, 4, 5 trees along the distance there. And because we're a long way back from that subject and we're zoomed in at about 60 mil, I'm not going to worry too much about the foreground. I'm not even going to worry about the background going slightly soft. It's the trees which are really critical. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to focus in on the subject. Yeah, so I've got the live view up on the screen, and I'm just going to focus on one of those middle trees, and I'm going to zoom in just to make sure that I've got what I'm looking for. I can see that it's slightly soft at the moment. Back button focusing, that snap straight into that. Incidentally, if I'm using any terminology like back button focusing, zooming in on the magnification and everything, if you don't get those terms, then my previous videos in this series will explain it. So I'll put a full link in the description to all of those videos so you can go back and look at all of my work on getting sharp pictures in the landscape. And we can zoom back out, put the 2-second timer on, exposure's right, and there we go, we take that picture. I'm going to bracket those now, and then I'll edit them when we get back to the office and put them up on the screen for you. But I'm really quite pleased with the results, very pleased with these. The landscape may do all the work, but it doesn't make it easy. Shooting directly into the sun, taking this photograph was challenging. I struggled to shield the lens from flare, but I'm pleased with the result. Well, we stopped for breakfast. Happens to be one of my favourite places on Dartmoor as well, so it's fantastic. The only thing is there's lots of little flies around, so if you see me swiping frantically, that's what it is. In fact, excuse me, you guys know how much I hate flies. At least that's keeping them off my neck a little bit. Yeah, so breakfast time. I thought I'd sit down and talk about this bit first because it needs a little bit of explanation. So another method that is tried and tested and used by a lot of photographers and understood by a lot of photographers is hyperfocal distance. Now, I read a lot about it, and I've seen a lot about it, and I've tried using it, but I'm yet to find a photographer who actually goes out in the field, gets out the app on their phone and starts working out hyperfocal distance, or gets out a calculator or something and works all of these things out and does it. And I think there's a very simple reason for that. When you're actually out working in the field, in reality, photography and composition and creative, anything creative is quite intuitive. And to start putting a lot of technical spin and mathematics on it doesn't really work. Having said that, I do use an app. I use an app called Photopills. Now I'm not endorsed by them in any way, and there's lots of other apps available and they all do pretty much the same sort of thing. But Photopills seems to work well for me. The main reason I don't use hyperfocal distancing is because exactly how do you judge 1.49 meters? There is another way of working, and that's using something called double hyperfocal distance. And I'm going to explain that when I take my next photograph. First of all, I'm going to finish my breakfast. So let's talk about hyperfocal distance. If you want to get front to back sharpness and you want to get the maximum depth of field, and by depth of field we mean the amount of the frame that is acceptable sharpness. So we're talking about, say, a meter from infinity, half a meter from to infinity, whatever it may be for that particular combination. There is a point at which you can focus. And if you focus on that point, at that distance, then you will achieve that maximum depth of field. So for any lens combination, focal length, aperture, sensor size, those details change. And that's where some of your apps do come in a little bit useful. So on this table, for example, I can see that a 24mm at f11 on my 5D Mark IV, I can get my hyperfocal distance is set to 1.72 meters. So if I focus at 1.72 meters, I will find that I will get pretty much everything in focus. So if I put those details into Photopills, into one of their calculators, everything from 0.86 meters in front of the lens all the way out to infinity will be in focus. So I know that that is what I'm going to be working at. So I've got up to 0.86 meters. But actually stood out here in the field right now, calculating 0.86 meters all the way to 1.72 meters and beyond is really quite difficult. So I use something called double hyperfocal distance, and that's exactly what it says on the tin. I double that 1.72. Put my filter holders on. I'll get some filters in a minute. The sun's coming up really much brighter. I'm going to have to put some filters on to slow it down so I can get a nice slow shutter speed and still manage to get some movement in that water. Okay, so I've got the Photopills app out, and the reason I've done that is because I want to calculate and work out what this double hyperfocal distance is. Now it's really quite easy. At the settings that I've got at the moment, at f11 24mm, my hyperfocal distance is 1.72 meters, and that gave me a near distance in focus to the lens of about 0.88 meters. Now all those things sound really good, but actually I can't judge them and calculate them in the field. It's a little bit difficult to do. But I know if I actually increase that by doubling that 1.72 hyperfocal distance to 3.44 meters, then my depth of field then is going to be 1.14 meters in front of the lens all the way out to infinity. So we've only got a difference of what, 14, 28, probably about a length of a school ruler of error. But we can focus anywhere between 3.44 meters and 1.72 meters. So that's a little bit easier for me to judge. In my mind, I'm thinking about about 1.5 to 2 standard door heights away from the lens, and everything will be good. So I can pick my distance where I'm going to focus now. I'm going to set up the lens. I'm going to get some filters on there just to darken things down a little bit for me, and then we'll take that photograph. Okay, so that's the exposure setup. So I've kind of worked out where I'm going to focus already, and it kind of works out that actually if I focus down here on this sort of end of this rock, end of this shelf, and that's going to be probably about 3, maybe a little bit too less. So I'm going to come in a little bit closer. I reckon from my height position where I am, that actually just down in that pool is probably about the 3 meters that I need to get. So what I can do is I can zoom in on that as well, just to make sure that it's really good. I'm going to use my back button focusing just to make sure it's zoomed in, and now we know that it's zoomed in on there. We can cancel that back out. We've got the self timer switched on already, and we can take that picture. By this time the sun had risen above the top of the tors. There is direction in the shadows, but as the sun climbs higher across the sky, it will soon be too contrasty for my style of photography. So that's really all there is to double hyperfocal distancing. All you need to do is work out your hyperfocal distance, double it, and then anywhere between hyperfocal and double hyperfocal, focus in that area. You've got quite a wide window to focus in, but it won't affect your depth of field that much. So there's one last method that I want to talk to you about, and that's focus stacking. Now, I'm not going to go into it in massive detail in this video because I've done a number of videos about it where I'm talking about it quite extensively. So I'll put some links to those in the end as well, maybe some thumbnails up on the screen now so you know what you're looking for. The reason we use focus stacking is really because sometimes, despite our best efforts to get maximum depth of field, the focal length that we want to use, the camera conditions and setups that we want to use, it just doesn't conform to the physics of optics, and we're not just able to get exactly what we want. But with modern technology, we are able to achieve that. So focus stacking is really does what it says on the tin. We're stacking a number of focused images on top of each other to create one image which has that maximum depth of field, that edge-to-edge sharpness from front to back. I'm going to focus on the edge of the rock that I want to be in focus in the foreground. Then I'm going to focus halfway between there and the background, and then take a picture of the background. And then when I put those together in Photoshop, it'll join those images together for me and blend the sharp areas together and give me one frame. So let's take those pictures, and then you can have a look at that final image. So first picture then, I'm just actually using my focusing method, zooming in nice and tight on the bottom of the frame, back button focus, focus on that point, 2-second timer, F11, half a second, take the picture. There's my first one done. I'm now going to focus halfway into the frame, just pick something that's going to work for me, zoom in, focused on that point, taking that picture, and then we're going to focus finally on the background, back button focusing, half a second, F11, final image. Let's put that finished picture up for you so you can see it. Although the light was getting contrasty, there was time to fit in one more photograph. Making the most of the contrasty light, I used it to bring out the detail and colours in the pink granite. So I hope that you found that video really useful. I certainly enjoyed making it. I've had a fantastic day today. I've really enjoyed the light that we've had. I've enjoyed coming out in the photography. I didn't really want to get up first thing, but I've experienced some beautiful light. I've had a wonderful walk, and I'm actually looking forward to a gentle walk back to the car this morning. The only other thing I would like to ask you, if you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up and share it with all your friends. All I want to say now is please go out, enjoy your own photography, get creative, and I'm going to see you in the next video.